Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to National Park After Dark. Today we have a very special episode because if you're just tuning in right now, you're actually tuning into part 2 of an episode we're doing.
Yeah, surprise. We didn't really prep anyone, but we did a really cool collaboration with Two Girls, One Ghost, Sabrina and Corinne. And usually for collaborations, obviously we'll come on and share some stories and just have it be one episode. But they had an awesome idea and we wanted to go back to a place that we've covered already, but we needed to go a little further into.
It's a lot of stories in Gettysburg National Military Park.
That's right. So what we did is, obviously, I covered Gettysburg in episode 131, but we covered 3 new topics. So Cassie and I did an episode on their feed that you should check out. It got released last week. And Cassie covered the women in disguise, women that fought as soldiers in the Civil War, and brought us through that story. And I talked about how the death industry and death in general kind of turned a little bit after the Civil War and how America dealt with death and just more of the gruesome stuff, I guess.
Yeah, the gruesome stuff, the historical stuff. It's a very historical based episode with a lot of weird history thrown in there that you probably haven't heard. At least we had never heard of until we started researching it for Gettysburg. But we decided to make this a 2-part episode because we dove into the historical parts on Two Girls, One Ghost podcast, but they're coming on ours today because they are the experts in all the paranormal stuff, and they have come up with a ton of stories that live within Gettysburg that you're going to want to know, especially if you're planning a visit there.
Which now I want to do. I mean,
Same.
I already did, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so obviously Gettysburg is one of the most haunted places in America, and Corinne and Sabrina have wanted to cover it for so long, and just the team up is really chef's kiss. I mean, we never even touched on any ghost story, really.
We didn't.
In Gettysburg, but it needed to be done. And they did it so beautifully.
They really did. So we are so excited to talk to them and welcome them to the podcast. We were on theirs, now they're on ours. And rumor has it that they are the most haunted podcast in America. So today, without further ado, we are talking to Corinne and Sabrina.
Well, hi, hey guys. Welcome to National Park After Dark. So glad to have you on.
Hi.
Yay!
We're so excited to be here.
I'm just like, I've been waiting for this part too because I'm just so we haven't talked about paranormal stuff in, I feel like, a while.
It's been a hot minute.
Which I can't imagine. That's hard for me to imagine just because of how haunted national parks are. But there's also, I guess, there's so much to cover in national parks that it's hard to do all.
Yeah. And I also think that, like, I like being told paranormal stories. Like, I do love sharing, of course, but there's like a magic to just being able to sit back and hear and get spooked. Oh, yeah. And I think that's why we're so looking forward to this.
Okay, well, before we talk, you didn't tell us yours.
Yeah, I was just going to say you were supposed to, I'm all flustered now. What is your ghost story? Because you started to tell us and we were like, wait, don't tell us because we need to be recording.
Yeah, before we got on the recording, you were going to tell them about your haunted house you moved into in Colorado.
I know.
So
then,
here's the thing. I have a theory of what happened. But long story short, I moved into this place in Colorado in September of last year. And originally it was like a 1-room tiny, right now it's 560 square feet. It's very small. But originally it was even smaller. And it was a little mountain 1930s cabin. And it's been, had additions put on. And I know the landlord very well. And she knows a couple of the people who have lived here before she even bought it. But obviously we don't know everything. So I'm not really entirely sure of its history. But when I first moved in, I had 3 separate things that happened kind of like boom, 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 like over like the first month or 2. And it's kind of been, knock on wood, a little quiet over the last few months. But it first started with hearing footsteps. And again, it's very small. I have a sliding barn door that kind of separates my bedroom from the main living space / kitchen. So it's not like there's really a big question as to like, what was that noise? Like everything is very audible.
Right.
Like I know.
You can pretty much see everything in your apartment.
Right, exactly. So the first thing was footsteps. It sounded like they were walking from like the the front door area across the living room and towards my bedroom, but obviously stopped. So that was the first thing. The second thing happened a couple weeks after that, and I was asleep in my bed. And I woke up, and it's kind of like when you're in the in-between. So you're awake, but you're like, you don't want to open your eyes. Like, you're like, oh, I'm just so tired. I hope I can fall back asleep. Like, it wasn't time to get up for the day. Like, I just wanted to like lull myself back to sleep. But I opened my eyes while I was still laying there, and in the corner of my room was a group of people.
What?
Like 3 or 4 people, outlines of them of various heights. Like, it looked like a collection of like kind of like a family, I guess.
Were they looking at you?
Yes, staring at me. But I couldn't picture, like, I couldn't make out distinguishing features. They were human, of course, shaped. But like, I couldn't say like what they looked like. You know what I mean? They were like outlines. And I looked at them and I inhaled, like gasped, which I've found out over the years that I'm not a screamer. I'm a like gasper when I'm scared.
You startle.
Yes, I startle. And so when I did that, they took one step forward towards me, and then they disappeared.
No.
Hell no. Oh my God.
I would have moved out as soon as that. I've heard this story before, but I would have moved out as soon as that happened.
What were the vibes? Good, bad, like just frightened or?
I mean, I was obviously startled because it surprised me.
Yeah.
But I wasn't scared. Like, I wasn't like, this is a bad feeling. I was obviously freaked out, but I wasn't like terrified I need to leave now type of thing. And then the third thing was like the most, for me, the most like important. So it was November 1st or when was it? It was Dia de los Muertos. I'll remember that forever. So I was sitting on my couch, and I can show it to you right here. It's like right here. I have this little thing. It's called a Furbo that monitors your pets, you know?
Feeds you.
And I got it because one of my dogs, when my fiance passed away, got really bad separation anxiety and was like destroying the house anytime I left. So I got it to kind of like monitor his activity when I was not here. So I was sitting on my couch, which is directly near the Furbo. Furbo has been fine like for months that I've had it. And it's dark. I'm watching TV. All the lights are off. And my dog, Chaska, who has the anxiety, flew out of the other room and came right to he had been there for hours, flew into the room, sat on my feet, and was looking around the room. His eyes were like looking around the room. And then all of a sudden, I hear this clicking noise. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, what is that sound? And I look over, and it's the Furbo's camera going from day mode to night mode, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it was, and Chaska wasn't moving because the Furbo does detect motion and will move. Chaska wasn't moving. I wasn't moving. His eyes were obviously looking around. And then all of a sudden the Furbo starts moving to what he was like, the direction that he was looking at. So I'm like,
did it record this?
So I was like, okay, what the fuck? And it's happening so fast. I have no idea what's going on. So I'm like, what is the Furbo like malfunctioning? Like, what the hell is going on? So I went onto the app to see like if there was an error message or something like that. And you can do a live view. And so I open the live view and I see it moving around, and there are orbs flying everywhere. Like literally fucking everywhere.
Oh.
Following this thing.
My God.
Oh. And then all of a sudden it stops. Chaska goes back to bed, and it has never done that again since that night.
And it was on Dia de los Muertos.
Oh my gosh.
And it was on Dia de los Muertos. And my theory that I will stick to because it's comforting rather than scary is, so I have a little like, obviously I am not of Mexican descent, but I do love Dia de los Muertos, and I love some of the things they do. And I have like a little kind of like ofrenda thing that I keep up year round of my dad and my fiance with their pictures and things of them. And, you know, I talk to it every once in a while or every day. And that day was especially difficult. And I was, you know, talking to them, and I just feel like it was them visiting me that day.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to go with that theory. And like the people I saw was maybe like my peeps on the other side.
I was going to say,
Just, you know, helping me transition. It was a hard move from the house I shared with Ian to here. And like, it stopped. Like, it's not like it's continued.
Right.
Like, I think it was just like during that transitionary period that I needed some support. They showed up for me.
because this was within the first few months of you living there, right? So, yeah.
That was within September, October, November, and then never happened again. And it's, you know, June.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So that's my experience in this house. And I haven't had any more, but I've met a few neighbors, and my neighborhood is like constituted a lot of those like early mountain houses that have just expanded. So they're all pretty old. So maybe it's the neighborhood vibes. Maybe it's, you know, my own thing happening. But either way, I don't feel frightened. So I'll take that.
That's the biggest thing. Yeah. Because I feel like our gut instincts are usually right. And yes, beyond, like, of course, seeing something paranormal is going to frighten you. Like, if it doesn't, who are you and why?
Well, you're not expecting, no one's expecting to see it
exactly.
most of the time. So
Exactly.
Yes.
But you can tell the difference between frightened because of unexpected surprise and terror or not, you know? So
Exactly.
And too, just the act of these figures in your second story who were, you kind of like saw the outline or the shadow of them taking a step forward could feel like such an intimidating move, or it could feel like such a comforting move. And the fact that you were able to, it didn't feel like a challenge of them like coming at you is just proof right there that it was either someone who is very much on your side helping you with the transition, or a group of spirits who are just curious about their new roommate.
What's happening?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, like what's going on type of thing. And I did, you know, obviously I initially did have the thoughts of like, you know, my theory, but I always want to know more. So I did reach out to my landlord, and I was like, I had just met her, you know, like just moved in. I like didn't want to be like a weirdo or anything, but I was just like, hey, just for fun, like just curious. I think I framed it like I have a really big interest in historic homes and their history. And I was just wondering if you knew. Like I wasn't like, hey, some shit's going down over here, but yeah. So, and she now obviously she knows, but like before she was like, yeah, I'm not really sure. And she lived here with her partner for a while, and they didn't have any experiences.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's my story.
That to me emphasizes your theory on it. So
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
it's funny because not that there is a version that's dark, but when you said like this is the version I'm gonna like tell myself and it's the one I like, it made me laugh because when Corinne and I on our show, we have like the Encounters episode where we just read listener stories. It's so funny when listeners will say like, you know, like that's probably like I'm just gonna pretend it was that, and then Corinne and I go into like really dark, disturbing theories on what else it could be, and I was like,
don't do that for me, please.
Thoughts they probably didn't even have.
or it's a demon coming for your soul.
Yeah, let's skip that part of this version.
Yours by far makes the most sense. Like, I feel like I have no rebuttals to that. That makes perfect sense for what you experienced, what people experienced beforehand too in that home.
yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
And before you even said your theory, that's kind of what I was thinking. So
Good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
we'll stick with it.
Hey, well, keep us posted if anything else happens.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We'll start a group chat and I'll be like, bitch, listen to this. But yeah, that was a good warm up.
Yeah.
And for anyone who did not listen to part 1 of this little mini series, Cassie and I were on Sabrina and Corinne's podcast, Two Girls, One Ghost, talking about like more the history of Gettysburg and, you know, doing our thing, which was fun.
It was a hidden history.
Yeah, we talked about some fun subjects.
Oh my gosh.
It's definitely history based, very much so.
Yeah. Learned about women and death in really cool, complex, interesting ways that I've never really heard it be talked about before. So yeah, thank you.
It was so fascinating. It was the topics of Gettysburg that we've never heard before. So I think it's a must listen.
We agree.
I feel like these 2 episodes are like not your middle school
That's
history
right.
class. Like the antithesis of, yeah.
If the 4 of us ever have a podcast together, that's what we'll call it. Not your middle school history class.
There we go.
Love it.
Let's write it down on the list of ideas that keeps growing.
Right?
Oh,
Infinite.
not every episode is like 20 different business ideas.
And lastly, before we get into it, just for anyone who's just tuning in again, obviously we've covered a Gettysburg story on the show in episode 131, as Sabrina so lovingly pointed
Yeah,
out.
there you go.
But Cassie and I covered 2 totally different stories for that national park. So go over to their feed and listen to it. And then we're going to get into some paranormal stuff now.
Yeah, we are. We'll start with a little bit of a recap of history. I know you guys have covered it. A lot of people probably have an idea of the Civil War, but maybe you don't, or maybe you need a refresher like us who, I don't know, very, very little details were retained within my memory until I looked at it again.
A refresher is always nice.
It is.
Yeah. So Gettysburg, Pennsylvania is pretty infamous for its role in the American Civil War, and it is home to Gettysburg National Military Park. Corinne and I have had, it's so interesting. I think I mentioned this when you were on our episode, but we have had so many listeners email us with their hauntings from Gettysburg. And like we've been flooded by it, which just to me, I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense because Gettysburg is flooded with spirits. And it's probably pretty hard to find another place that's like as haunted as this place because it's so, it's just like, known, like so much death has been known there.
Everyone says the energy is palpable. And you guys haven't been, right? None of us have
I
been
have
here.
not.
Yeah.
We want to, though.
I have. I've been, but it was when I was younger, so I don't think I necessarily, I don't know. I wasn't there with a paranormal lens, and I probably wasn't there with an enthusiastic historical
Like,
lens
why am I
either. I was
here?
there with a
Being dragged along.
middle school, I forgot to brush my hair, wearing my Wicked t-shirt
Gotcha.
lens. Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
That's how I was when I was in the Ford Theater. Okay. When I went on my 8th grade trip, like I would love to go now because back then I was like obsessed
know.
with a kid named Cody and like that was my world. So
The
wasted.
Ford Theater.
wasted
The
that.
Ford Theater couldn't compare to Cody.
That's right.
Well, yeah. So that just to say, like the Gettysburg is very, very haunted, and this episode will encompass the history, horror, and haunts.
Yes.
Cool. We're
It
excited.
will. I know it's going to get very spooky towards the end, but like Sabrina said, for some of the history, you guys covered a lot about the Civil War and what that means on episode 131 of your feed, and then the episode you did over on our feed. But there's also a Gettysburg, Pennsylvania before the war, which we feel like is also important to inform some of the ghost stories that come, because obviously this land saw a lot of death and a lot of dismemberment and a lot of horrors. But before then, there were people living there too. The Penn family, who we're guessing Pennsylvania is named after, they encouraged European settlers to come to the land that had previously been occupied by native tribes. And Gettysburg was caught in the midst of firestorms and raids during the French and Indian War. So there was already a lot going on there before what we even know to be true for American history. And in 1761, an Irishman named Samuel Geddes settled into the region, which was then called York County. And he established the Dobbin House Tavern, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
And it's the one that I was going to stay at. Like I found a room. It was $175 for one night. And I was like, I can do this. I can drive out here and stay. And it was like a massive suite.
And record this episode from there.
Yeah.
And it's haunted. I'm assuming
Oh,
because
it
we're
didn't.
talking about
And
it.
it's yes.
We'll go into some of the hauntings.
I think it's harder to find a place that isn't haunted than
That's
it is to
true.
find a place
True.
that is haunted in Gettysburg.
Got to look for the new builds.
Yeah. And anyone who is trying to seek out the ghosts and wants to stay at a place. I mean, the Dobbin House Tavern is a great spot because it was a spot that was frequented by soldiers and traders alike. And it still obviously exists as a bed and breakfast and a restaurant. So everyone can go and stay there.
Ooh. I'm picturing like a very quaint bed and breakfast, very old. I haven't seen pictures of it, but I'm picturing wallpaper
Oh, yeah.
and really good food
Mhm.
and
I'm
Yeah,
seeing
weird creaking
cobblestone.
floors.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. Kind of like lopsided floors, like they go in different. Yep, that's
And
exactly
all
it.
of those old homes always have doors that kind of lead to interesting places. Like I stayed at an
Weird
Airbnb,
places.
or it wasn't an Airbnb. I guess it was a bed and breakfast in Rhode Island that was a really historical building that actually was sold last year. And it was like the friends of Lizzie Borden and all the stuff. And I was so excited to stay there until it became like 10 p.m. And then I was terrified. And there was a door through our bathroom that if someone opened the coat closet, like in the hallway, they could have gone beyond all of the cleaning supplies and like broken into my room. And I was so scared of the whole place. But it was awesome.
Oh, creepy.
So I assume this place is very similar.
All about the thrill.
Yes, it was a thrill. Okay, so here in Gettysburg, by the late 1790s, there was a desire to form an independent/new county seat. So essentially saying like, okay, we want to have a capital of the county somewhere different than where it is. And on January 22nd, 1800, the Pennsylvania legislature created Adams County with Gettysburg as its county seat. By 1860, the town had grown to 2,400 citizens and 10 roads led into town where 450 buildings housed small but thriving businesses, which to me seems like so many businesses for a kind of small population at the time. But I think a lot of people were coming in.
I think it was like 450 total buildings, and some of them were businesses,
that would make
but
more
most
sense,
of them were like
I'm like,
homes.
that is a wild ratio. Like, does everyone also own a business who lives here?
Yeah.
Everyone is a business owner.
Yes.
It's a supportive community. Everyone shops at each other's places.
Actually, it kind of sounds like my dream because I would love to live on a commune. So I feel like this is basically what that is.
I say that all the time. I say that to all my friends. I'm like, especially because I'm in the maybe house buying process right now. I'm like, what if we just bought a giant piece of land and we all lived together? Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be nice.
Wouldn't it be? It would be.
That's such a Vermont thing to say, also.
Yeah.
Vermont already feels like that.
You know, as the fellow
That's
Vermonter
true.
here, I will say there's people that I went to high school with whose parents did that. Not really a commune, so to speak, but they bought a bunch of acres of land all together, this big best friend group, and all like they bought it, divided it up, and then built houses. So these people that are now in their 60s all have these houses with their neighbors as their best friends from when they were like 20 years old. Isn't that so cool?
It's a smart move.
That's my dream.
It is a dream.
Yeah, you make your own neighborhood. You have your best friends as neighbors.
Okay. This is so sad. This is just how my brain works. But my first thought goes to what happens if there's a fight between their friends and they're all stuck
You
there?
sell your house.
You gotta just,
You fight it out.
I was gonna say fight it out. Yeah.
You meet at the cul-de-sac at 2 p.m. and you guys
You brawl.
everyone goes on the sides that they side with and
Pick your weapon.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you guys, we already referenced this a few times, but in episode 131 of your podcast, National Park After Dark, you talk about the Civil War and some of the gruesome sides of what happened during that war. And the war in and of itself is just incredibly complex. There are hours and hours of audio, thousands of texts, books, journals, podcasts, etc. that cover the Civil War. It's actually the most extensively studied and written about war in US history. So I think we can say for certain that despite us probably collectively now having 6 hours of podcasting about the Civil War, we will never properly honor the history because there is so much and we are restrained to just a few episodes here. But that's pretty much our initial spiel to tell you that we fully acknowledge that there's a lot going on in Gettysburg, but we want to give a little bit of historical context to help us in a few moments when we talk about more of the paranormal and morbid side of events.
Yep.
gotta know the history to know why the ghosts are there.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so like you said, Civil War was fought between the U.S. or United States of America and the Confederate States of America. So the Union versus the Confederacy, and primarily was fought over slavery and the abolition of slavery. The Union wanting to abolish it, the Confederacy wanting to preserve it. In the end of the war, the Union defeated the Confederate States, which resulted in the Southern states being readmitted and slavery being abolished nationwide. More than 3 million people fought in the war, and Cassie, I think you said 750,000 souls were lost, or something around there. Yeah, so nearly 2% of the population. Disease was the chief killer during the war. And while I was researching, I found this fun fact. So it has nothing to do with paranormal at all, but I just really liked it. Ulysses S. Grant apparently hated military music and chants. And he was like grumpily quoted saying he could only recognize 2 tunes. One was Yankee Doodle, the other was not.
I need to know what the other one was.
I just imagine like a grumpy.
It's just like it either was Yankee Doodle Dandy or it wasn't.
Yeah, and I hated them all.
Seems like a very to the point type of guy.
Yeah, just because in your episode on our feed, you talked a lot about women in the Civil War. I found that an estimate of somewhere between 400 and 750 women fought in the Civil War, most of them dressed as men and enlisted in secrecy. And that number is also like, there's no way to know for sure if it's correct.
Yeah. So like you were saying, Cassie, there's probably so many more.
Yeah, because historically speaking, a lot of it was hidden and covered up, or women who were found out were turned to be nurses instead, or people were embarrassed that women even got into the military and it was a hush-hush thing, like get them out, send them home in their dresses and send them back to their kitchens. They can't be here. And it was very, very hush-hush secret part of the Civil War.
But you did an awesome job and brought to the forefront a lot of really amazing stories of women in the war. So check out our feed for that portion of the show.
Yes, please do.
So, okay, this brings us to Gettysburg. The bloodiest battle of the Civil War was fought at Gettysburg with 51,116 casualties.
That we know of. We'll caveat it with that.
That we know of. Correct. This battle took place a little bit of like 2 years into the war. It was fought from July 1st to July 3rd of 1963. And the intent of the battle was the Confederate General Robert E. Lee basically wanted to go up to the north to get more supplies. And secondly, I think there was a big battle down south that was happening, and he wanted to draw attention away from it to try to help Confederate troops. None of those things worked out in his favor because they were unexpectedly met by, I think, so he went up north with 75,000 men or soldiers, and then were unexpectedly met by 95,000 Union soldiers led by Major General George Meade. So already they're super outnumbered, and it began a very bloody battle with a horrendous amount of human suffering. Keep in mind, this is also July, like in open, vast fields.
Muggy.
It is hot. It is bloody. They're out of supplies, like rations are low.
And what were they wearing? Probably wool.
Pretty awful conditions.
Yeah,
horrible.
that's
wool
also a factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, 90 degrees out, no shade.
Yep. On day one, it was I think day one was kind of shocking because the Confederates didn't realize that they were going to be met by the Unions, but day 2 and 3 were the bloodiest days. On day 2, Robert Lee was like, hey, go charge through this farmland. And one of his, another man George E. Pickett, who was like leading that troop specifically, was like, we don't have men to do this. And Lee just continued with his order. And so unsurprisingly, it became a pretty disastrous sacrifice for the Confederates. And by the end of that, 60% of that small division died in battle. And Lee and the Confederates were forced to withdraw his men and return to Virginia with what few soldiers had left. And also, the Confederate troops lost at the battle in Mississippi. So it was like a double victory for the Union, and now seen as a massive turning point in the Civil War. A little not so fun, very morbid facts. In those 3 days, 10,000 were killed, 30,000 were wounded, 10,000 were captured or missing. Only one civilian was killed by fire during the battle. And months later in November, Gettysburg battlefield became the final resting place for the Union souls. And at the burial on November 18th, 1863, which is still when Civil War is going on, is when President Lincoln gave Gettysburg address. Today, it is the Gettysburg National Military Park, and it encompasses, I think, 6,000 acres. Beyond that, 6,000 acres, I mean, let's just say that 6,000 acres is 100% like 6,000 acres of haunted land. And then even beyond that is haunted.
It's a lot of acres to be walking around with some ghosts.
Oh, yeah. You are certain to find ghosts.
It's like America's epicenter for paranormal activity. That's sort of what it feels like.
Yeah. It's also a place where I feel like whenever you think of ghosts, you're like, okay, they're going to be in a weird, creepy house, hotel. But Gettysburg is like free range.
Yes.
They're outside. They're inside.
It's everywhere.
There's no escaping.
Yes. They're in the middle of the field. They're in the tree line. They're in the restaurant. They're in your Airbnb. Like anything.
Yeah.
I grew up in like Princeton, New Jersey, which is also pretty famous for the Revolutionary War. We used to go play kickball in the Princeton battlefield and like go picnic out there.
How times have changed.
Yeah.
I know. I was just like, when I now look back at that, I'm like, we were just frolicking around on haunted land.
Where many people died.
Many, yes.
I mean, being born and raised in New England and having cemeteries around my hometown that date back to the 1600s, you know, like being New England girls, we've probably done our fair share of childhood activities in places where people were like, you know, prosecuted and hunted down for witchcraft and all of that. You know, like it is like when you stop and open your eyes at like where you actually are standing, there's a lot of not so chill things that happen.
Oh my God. One of the fields that I think it was my elementary school's like soccer field was basically essentially like right on top of a native burial ground. So there's a lot of bad
There's a lot of stuff happening there.
Yes.
Ooh.
Anyway, on to the hauntings.
Anyway, Gettysburg is very haunted.
It's super haunted.
Yes.
Okay, but I think we'd be remiss to not start with the battlefield, right? So there's just like we were saying before, where there's just so much to the history and so much to what happened on this land and in the Civil War and at Gettysburg, and just so many things that we could probably create a 100 episode podcast about to try to encompass all of the things.
Sure.
There's just as many when it comes to the hauntings, because there was a lot of death and suffering, which equals a lot of spirits that are unable to move forward. And also, Sabrina and I talk about this stuff a lot on our feed, where not all hauntings are active hauntings. A lot of them seem to be kind of this residual stain that is left over from the horrible things that have occurred somewhere. So even though we might see a spirit in uniform walking along the woods, it doesn't mean that person is actually trapped there. It could just be the energy, the world remembering what happened so many times over and over in this one instance.
And then also on top of that, I mean, this gets into a much deeper conversation that is very mind-boggling, and people might be like, are you having a high conversation? Because we've also talked about like glitches in time, where we know time is a construct that we came up with. So we don't really know how it works, but it is a dimension of our space. So like, can time be happening all at once? And if so, is it possible that we are for a moment glimpsing not a spirit, but like a timeline,
Another dimension.
A
the
wrinkle
past.
in time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have a listener story that we'll share at the end of this that is kind of brings up a lot of questions about it. And it is.
Ooh.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay. I love contemplating things like this. It's,
Me too.
yeah, favorite pastime. And yeah, people are like, that's a high conversation, but
Just our normal everyday conversations.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, for Gettysburg, there's blood, there's violence, there's death, there's pain, and all of that equals ghosts, like we're talking about. And so Sabrina and I have pulled out just a few places and a few spirits to talk about, but again, we could go on and on and on about all of them. But there are many legends at Gettysburg and reports of ghostly soldiers, phantom horsemen, and even exorcisms in Gettysburg.
Spooky.
So spooky, so spooky. It makes me even more scared to go visit. Like, I want to go, but I'm like, oh my God, what if I get possessed?
I see Danielle's eyes lighting up, and she's like getting ready to book a hotel for me to.
I will say I don't mess with exorcisms like that. I don't like the possession stuff, but everything else I'm game for.
I think a lot of the exorcisms in regards to Gettysburg is often kind of what you were talking about, Danielle, in the first version of this, or the first episode you did, is not having the knowledge about some medical issues and ailments, and perhaps like misdiagnosing it as, a possession. So let's perform an exorcism rather than an actual possession.
So while there was plenty of death and plenty of people who lived in this area before, many of the ghost stories that we know began on the battlefield. July 3rd, 1863, as the Union soldiers marched toward victory, they recalled that they weren't just led by General George Meade. No, they were also led by General George Washington, who had been dead since 1799.
Oh.
So he was like marching with them to victory.
God.
It's so
I've
spooky.
never heard this.
I've never heard this before.
Yeah.
I know. So this was what was really fascinating, is so many people, because of how important the Civil War and Gettysburg is to like U.S. history, everyone's like, well, you're diminishing that importance by saying it's haunted. But it's like, no, these ghost stories happened back on the battlefield and are recorded by soldiers. So it's not like we're making this up now in present day to make money. It was happening.
It was happening during. So it's not even
The
like
war.
10 years later people start talking about
Yeah.
it.
That's so interesting to hear that there's stories of paranormal activity here prior. I mean, every time I think of it or hear of it is after because of the Civil War, not
Yeah.
so the fact that soldiers were experiencing paranormal activity as well is very interesting.
Yeah. And another example of that, this one kind of is less on the battlefield during it, but kind of in the weeks, months following the battle at Gettysburg is, and still to this day is one of the most commonly experienced hauntings, is at Iverson's Pits. So Iverson's Pits is the open field upon which the Battle of Gettysburg began. It is where the Union troops surprised the Confederate soldiers. And just as a trigger warning and FYI, the following details are pretty gruesome if anyone does not want to hear it. So as the Confederate soldiers approached this open field, they were killed so suddenly and so quickly that those who marched on were sprayed by the blood of men shot before them. Many of the living dropped to the ground and started waving white handkerchiefs in surrender. A surviving artilleryman wrote, I think he must have written in a journal or something after the fact. He described a row of 79 North Carolinians executed in one single volley, their dead feet perfectly aligned. Great God, he wrote, when will this horrid war stop? He then wrote that the living rolled the dead into shallow trenches, which is where the field gets its name, Iverson's Pits. Rather than like a massive grave, they were rolled into small little pits. And then this is where, we were saying with Corinne, the last story you shared about how they saw George Washington on the battlefield. So the hunting started during the war. This is not necessarily during the war, but like right after Gettysburg battle happened and the war moved elsewhere, the land of Iverson's Pits went back to being farmland. And apparently the farmer who owned the land claimed that his wheat grew the tallest in that part of his field.
I mean, it would make sense just from a purely,
Fertilizer.
Yeah.
Fertilizer in this particular area. I mean, it's gruesome to think of, but makes sense.
Yes.
It
So
does make sense.
it does. It's just really morbid and disturbing. And then also for years afterwards, the farmhands who were hired to work on the farm refused to work on the fields after dark because they were convinced it was haunted. They would see, hear, and feel spirits of Confederate soldiers. And to this day, it is reported to be haunted. Often people will go by it and it's like, dark, it's fine. But then all of a sudden a mist out of nowhere will start rolling in. And then they'll start to see these like small white things being,
No.
yeah, like as if it's the handkerchiefs being waved by the soldiers still to this day.
Would you guys go out there at night?
If I were in my car, yes.
But not like walk in the trenches at night or anything?
Or the field or
I
whatever
think it depends on group size. I think if I were with like 6 people, I would, but I wouldn't do it solo or with just like me and Sabrina.
And it's like, this is the hard thing with paranormal is the intention behind humans and what they're looking for can like alter the reaction of the spirits, right? If we're going to be like, oh, I want to see this haunting, that might piss off a couple spirits who are like, oh, you want to see us?
Well, it's like the classic Zach Bagans, like, come at me, bro. Like, put this axe above my head and crush it through my skull. And the spirits are like, get the hell out. Like, what? Who are you? You know, people get different reactions because of what their own energy brings and stirs up.
Exactly.
Very true.
Fair. So you have to go out there without the intention of seeing anything,
which is hard to
just for my nightly walk through this battlefield that has horrendous history, just going for my nightly stroll.
Yeah. So this kind of haunting is really, really common on many, if not all of the battlefields in Gettysburg. So that's like kind of the more in depth of that field of the fields that we will talk about. But there are some more infamous haunted places or battlefields at Gettysburg. The Grove, Devil's Den, and Sachs Covered Bridge are just a few of them. And you can walk around and through the park. And I can even if you're not open to the paranormal, I feel like there's a pretty high chance that you're going to experience something paranormal here. You might not know it's paranormal, but you're probably experiencing something paranormal.
Mm-hmm. Even if it's just like a vibe or a feeling or just something off. And I feel like when we did our original Gettysburg episode, I'm pretty sure we had a huge response of like, I live near here, or like, this is my home park, that we were kind of like taken aback by. Like, we didn't realize that we had such a like big concentration of audience down there, which is awesome. But like, a lot of people would write in and be like, I ride my bike through there all the time. Like, I recreate there like normally in my day-to-day activity in life. And for us, who's so far removed and view Gettysburg as like this, you know, in this kind of still shot of history, like for a lot of people, it's just a normal part of their current life.
Their
and
dog park, their sunbathing spot, their children's birthday party out on the green.
Kickball for me, you know?
Yeah, perfect example.
Actually, this is such a tangent, but when I was a freshman in high school, we had a big kickball day at the Princeton battlefield, and two boys had a fight over me and got in a fist fight. And it was, maybe one of my proudest moments in life.
Wow.
You had two guys have a battle over you.
On the battlefield.
A duel on a battlefield. Iconic.
for your hand.
Neither of them won my heart, so...
That's too funny.
That's amazing. We keep saying we want to go back in time and see what things are like, but Sabrina, I kind of want to go back in time and watch that moment of your life. I'll time travel to that with my binoculars out in the field. Go Sabrina. Okay, so we mentioned that there is a bunch of structures in Gettysburg. There's over 400 buildings, 400 to 600 buildings at the time. And many of the soldiers during the Gettysburg situation, Civil War, all of that, all of the battles, they commandeered these buildings. Many of them were businesses, but they were also personal homes, and they were just basically, people's homes were being intruded upon and turned into hospitals and used as shields from the gunshots that were just like constantly penetrating all across the fields in these many, many acres of land. So it's not surprising that despite the land being haunted, many of the structures are too. And the Farnsworth House Inn is one of the most haunted buildings in Gettysburg. During the Battle of Gettysburg, many families and civilians hunkered down in their houses' cellars and sought shelter there because there would be bullets flying and just like coming through the walls and going multiple walls deep. So even if you weren't near a window or a door, you weren't safe. And so a lot of people, when they heard gunshots and fire and whatever, they would run down into their cellar and they would stay there for a really long time. This particular house, the Farnsworth House Inn, it was riddled with 135 bullet holes, but everyone who sought safety inside survived, which is incredible.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of ironic given that it's super haunted.
So people were inside when these bullet holes were coming through and no one was shot?
No.
Or no one died from a shot?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
And despite there being no deaths in the home, the current owners, the Schultz family, claim that there are at least 16 distinct spirits that haunt this home, the inn. So another place you can stay.
Haunt/protect.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is an 8-year-old little boy who's there. That's one of the spirits. They also say the majority of them are Civil War soldiers, primarily Confederate soldiers. And there's also a former midwife they believe to be there. The soldiers apparently patrol the home. So kind of like what you were saying, they almost protect the home. They thump around, they smoke their cigars, they breathe very heavily, startling people who stay there.
Oh, I would hate that. I hate heavy breathing.
Yeah, Cassie has a
Like,
thing about loud breath.
Like, get away from me.
Yeah, and it leads many people to believe that for a really long time the home was used as a headquarters for something. Like maybe it was a hospital, maybe there were people who died here or spent a lot of time here that maybe we just don't know about. We know it wasn't from gunshots riddling the sides of the home.
Right.
But some things here because people are deep breathing and they've posted up.
You know what? It kind of reminds me of Danielle did an episode on the Stanley Hotel and it's haunted from people who enjoyed it there.
Yeah.
So maybe that home has people in it that just really loved the area and never
They
left.
just want to go
Yeah.
back.
I mean, with 16 spirits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their own commune.
Yeah.
That's true.
There it is.
I love that.
An afterlife commune.
Yeah,
but the Stanley Hotel is like one of the only places that I've been that I don't have a personal like tie or connection to. Like, when you go back to your childhood home or like somewhere that you yourself had really nice fond memories of, like it gives you that sort of like feeling. The Stanley Hotel is the only place that I've ever been aside from that I have felt that way. Like it feels to me at least very warm and inviting, and like you can just tell so many people enjoyed their lives and like some of the best times of their lives there. Like I feel that when I'm there. I don't know about Cassie because I've brought Cassie before.
Yeah. I'm curious if a past life of yours maybe has spent a lot of time there, or if you're just really receptive and you're picking up on all of the warm, positive energy that the spirits that haunt there obviously feel towards it, and it's kind of like becoming your own. Maybe you're an empath.
I've just always like, I'm one of those people who like, not like Zach Bagans, but or Baggins or however you say his name, but like I don't obviously like go in with like that wild of a intention. But I do go, like, I've brought Cassie many places that I'm like, this is the history. There's paranormal activity here. Like, I hope something happens here to me. Like, you know what I mean? And sometimes we've been to the Crescent Hotel in Arkansas, and she had a lot of vibes there that I never picked up on.
Good or bad?
Good or bad. I didn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, that one's super haunted. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, did anything happen right here? Because I don't feel good right here. And we're like looking it up. It's like, I don't think anything happened.
Were you
right
in the
here.
basement?
And I was like, no, I was standing in front of an elevator. And I was like, there's something happening right here, and I don't know what it is, but I don't like it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was an old hospital. So many things were going on. I mean, it
could be anything.
You never know. Like where in the hospital things were happening. But I remember distinctly standing in front of one of the elevators and being like, there's a really bad energy right now.
Wow.
Jeez. That's the tough part of going places that are haunted. You never really know if you're going to experience something that feels really magical and exciting, or if you're just going to feel kind of like gross and sad about being there.
Yeah.
The worstest stories of people who like black out or like get super nauseous at a haunted place, and like the second they step outside, they're fine.
They feel better. Yeah.
It's just the energy is so strong that it's physically changing how you feel.
Totally. Yeah. Okay, well, luckily for people who are in Gettysburg, who are staying at this inn, the Farnsworth House Inn, they hopefully won't faint or feel gross or anything. And in fact, the midwife, that woman who is said to haunt this inn, she also really cares for the guests who are there. People have reported that at night they'll feel her sit on the end of their bed and tuck them in.
Oh,
which is so nice, lovely, but also terrifying.
I know.
I do like being tucked in. I don't know.
If you close your eyes and pretend a ghost isn't doing it, you could really enjoy it, I think.
Yeah,
I guess so.
There's one particular room in this place that's also super haunted. It's the most haunted place in this most haunted house, and it is the Sarah Black room. It was named after one of the previous owners, and there are many photographs of a spirit looking out from the window of this room out onto the street. There's also a ghost of a cranky kitchen cook who lives there. Haunts there, I guess. And she's been described as this older woman dressed in 19th century clothing and is known to move things around in the pantry. And she's also quite brash. She's pretty rude. I love her for that. And, well, I guess I don't love her for this part. She tries to trip the waitresses. So she's kind of mean, I think.
Yeah.
And she grabbed a waitress one time by her apron strings and like pulled her backwards. So she's actually kind of aggressive.
But only to the staff, which makes me think that she's like, you aren't running my kitchen properly.
Yeah, there's some jealousy. There's some ego situation going on there.
Yeah.
Does anything ever happen to the cooks?
I wonder.
I don't know. We'll give them a ring after this and find out.
Yeah. Like, is it just the waitresses she doesn't like, or are the cooks doing okay?
Yeah, we'll have to find out. This is my like, okay, I really want to start a segment where, again, another business idea that like, how do you execute it? Where we start talking about something, or maybe we do a part 2 of every episode where we call the people who work at the places we talk about and live ask them if it's haunted and
It's
get their
the follow-up.
reactions. Yeah.
That would
Oh.
be cool.
Yeah.
Do you have to ask permission for something like that though?
Maybe like after we get their response, we can be like, hey, can we use this on our podcast?
Yeah.
Quick,
They're just
sign
like
this
listening
form.
one day and they're like, hold on, that's me.
It won't be live. Yeah. We pre-record and then after the fact ask before posting it live.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good follow-up and gives more context.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun.
I do too.
Will we do it? Probably not.
Keep us updated though.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for it in a few
Yeah.
years when you get around to it.
You're like, finally, we talked about this on June 5th, 2023.
So another haunted place that has hauntings on top of hauntings. This is called the Gettysburg Orphanage. And trigger warning, there is some child abuse. At the time of the battle, this building, the Gettysburg Orphanage, was a private residence. And during the battle, like many other buildings in Gettysburg, it was converted into a hospital, and soldiers, wounded, dying, and dead alike were brought into the cellar. After the war, the home was turned into an orphanage, and there were reports of ghostly soldiers, phantom cries, and screams and moans aplenty. If that were not enough, it is said that one of the headmistresses of the orphanage, Rosa Carmichael, was pretty horrendous to the children in this orphanage, and that she tortured and chained orphan children in the cellar, turning it into like a dungeon.
It's awful.
It's hard because it's like, it is known that she was a disciplinarian, and I'm not condoning how disciplinarians, punish people in the day, because there's probably a lot of cruel punishments, but I don't necessarily know that there's evidence that she was even more so and that she actually did chain children up. That is just part of the legend.
It's like Miss Trunchbull from Matilda.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
She had that box, whatever that was called.
The chokey? Chokey.
The chokey. Yeah, had the nails sticking.
Oh, so awful.
Do you know, is that what it's actually called, that torture device?
Oh, I don't know.
Because that is an actual torture device, like from like a medieval time frame.
That they used in the children's movie that we all grew up with.
Yes.
I know, I still
Right.
cannot look at a piece of chocolate cake the same from that.
Oh,
point.
my
I know. I
God.
always think of Bruce. Bruce.
Yeah.
Bruce.
Just covered in chocolate.
That's one movie that I can for sure quote. Okay. Actually, I watched it like last week. So this building, the orphanage, a lot of things happened behind closed doors. What happened exactly, we're not sure. But there are today, a lot of people have encountered spirits of soldiers and of children, and also of something evil. There is a darkness that can be felt, and many people attribute it to the spirit of the headmistress, that she is still there and enacting evil things. I don't know, being violent to people who visit it today. There are others who have reported seeing the apparition of a small boy who appears in the corners of the basement. And then people have caught orbs, strange lights. Some have seen and heard children. Some have heard children laughing, and sadly, some children crying.
Poor babies.
Don't love that.
No.
That's really sad.
Yeah, we don't cover a lot of stories. I know you guys kind of cover the gamut with different like stories and paranormal activity and things like that. And we've just haven't really come across anything like that yet,
Yeah.
like that we have covered. And just like the fact that, any of these situations is obviously sad. Paranormal activity comes from someone losing their life, usually in a traumatic way, whatever. But like the children aspect of it makes it a lot more difficult to just kind of process. And like I know a lot of it comes from legend and things like that, but if people are really experiencing like hearing that stuff and all of that, like obviously something happened,
Yeah.
And what we've learned also in all of our research, and this is like, it makes it worse, is children ghosts are really hard to trust. Not in this specific or like situation, but like demons and dark spirits mimic children to like get your trust.
No.
Which is
Oh, no.
horrifying.
That's really scary.
I mean, there are a lot of entities in the woods, different cryptids and creatures that mimic like a baby's cries and things like that.
Yeah. Corinne, what's the episode you did? I think you did like a missing 411 episode.
Oh, yeah.
Where there was the kid who was in the cave and there was something mimicking his grandmother.
Oh, yes.
I feel like that's a really good one for Danielle and Cassie to cover.
Oh, is that a Spearfinger? Is that what? There's a cryptid and it's in native lore, but it's Spearfinger. She looks like an old woman, like your grandmother, and she lures children in as being like an old grandmother, but she has this really long fingernail that she kills children with.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
gets ya.
Oh, no, I haven't
Yeah.
heard of that one. This one feels, we're like not really sure if this is some sort of paranormal entity, like a cryptid type creature, or if it's some sort of alien creature, because in this one particular case, this little boy was separated and lured to a cave where there was this woman who looked exactly like his grandmother, who he realized wasn't his grandmother once they were in the cave together because of her odd behavior. And she was really scaring him, but she was really insistent on him defecating onto like this, almost like a piece of paper that she had prepared. So she was like collecting a sample of sorts from him. And then he was never killed. Like, he was found again. He was brought back to wherever he needed to be. But there's just weird.
But he was like really, really far away from where he like left his, or when he got separated from his family. We'll find out what the place is and we'll
I
send
hope
it to
it
you.
was an alien or a cryptid. Otherwise, what a freak.
Yeah, if you,
I hope so too.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
back to us with that.
if you haven't gone down the
Yeah.
missing 411 rabbit hole with David Politis, you guys have to look
Oh,
into
trust
that.
me, we've had
my gosh.
people are always like, you should, we don't know if you know about this, but you should.
How can you not?
Like,
It's so I've been obsessed with it for
It's so
years.
prevalent.
I watch his
Yeah.
YouTube. It's
Yeah.
it's like so good and fascinating and entertaining, while also being so incredibly horrifying, because this is happening to actual people and so many kids are involved in it, and so it like makes you so sad, but you're also just so intrigued by like, what the hell is happening? Why are there these big furry monsters that are bringing children 40 miles away from where they were last seen, and they're like not the least bit dirty? There's just, I'm super into all that stuff. Bigfoot. I love him.
Questions.
yeah,
Thought provoking.
Very.
yes.
So many. Okay, so there's so many haunted places in Gettysburg. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a few more of them, but just also made a little bit of like a highlight bulleted list for if anyone else is curious to look up more of the haunted places in Gettysburg. So one is the George Wickert House, which is on the battlefield. There's also the Homo Ball House. My gosh, I'm struggling over these names. The Cashtown Inn, which is a fully functioning bed and breakfast. So many bed and breakfasts are haunted over here. The Dobbins House Tavern, which we mentioned earlier, that is a bed and breakfast that served as a stop on the Underground Railroad as well. So you get more than just the Battle of Gettysburg there.
A lot of history.
There's the Gettysburg Hotel, which had been functioning as a makeshift hospital at the time. There's the Gettysburg Academy Bed and Breakfast. And there is an inn called the Balladary Inn, where this is probably the inn that we would recommend least, unless you are
Okay.
curious to hear soldiers screaming in the middle of the night, which is really horrible and sad. And people often see a spirit of a nurse from the war as well. So clearly there was just a lot of bad energy in this particular inn.
It was maybe a hospital.
Yeah,
Yes.
a lot of these buildings.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Rose Farm was used as a hospital during the battle, and hundreds of bodies were buried there. And when the family returned to their home, one of their daughters began having terrible experiences in this home. She had lived through the gunshots, and she had seen and smelt the dead during this battle. But being back in the house, she started to see blood. She swore she saw blood seeping through the walls. So this was quite literally a bleeding house, bringing back blood from the recent past.
That's like an
Yeah,
Amityville horror. Is that it?
I think so.
That story with the bleeding walls?
I feel like there's so many like that.
Yeah.
That also makes
Yeah.
me think of The Shining
And The
movie,
Shining. Yeah, of
book.
course.
Yeah.
I feel like, God, I want to say it's that people are screaming at me, obviously, but I really think it is the Amityville
That sounds right.
horror.
Well, it's the stories of people who start to lose their wherewithal and just kind of succumb to the energies within the home and start, whether it's real blood coming from the walls or it's a hallucination. I mean, Amityville that story fits that.
We actually just did a crossover with One Strange Thing, and they told us a story all about the bleeding house in Atlanta, and they still have no idea. It was real human blood. They have
Forensic
no idea where it came from.
Evidence.
It's like
No clue how it got there.
such a wild
No.
mystery.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Splattered all over the house. like a geyser of blood
Yeah.
gushing from the ground. And
What?
today,
Okay, I need
That
to know.
is freaky. That is very freaky.
yeah. Look into that
The
one.
fact that there's multiple bleeding houses,
right? Right?
You're like, which
There's
one was
Something
it?
is wrong.
Which bleeding house is
There
it?
shouldn't be bleeding houses.
No, I know. Yeah, the fact that we're getting confused and can't remember which bleeding house is a disturbing thought.
Yes.
Oh,
It also doesn't help my thoughts with my own house buying. I'm like, okay, can I ask the
know.
realtor, is this a bleeding house or a
Can I
non-bleeding house?
Stay one night before I buy. Try before I buy,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
Yes, please. If I bought a house that was like haunted with things that were evil, I would. Oh, that would be.
Yeah.
I'll
the
come
worst.
over. I have a lot of things in my Vermont house to help clear your Vermont house. Trust me.
I would love that. I would love that.
We'll do a little clearing.
Let
and
me know when
cleansing.
you're over here.
I will.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So the Rose Farm, just to wrap up this farm, there were many bodies exhumed and moved in November of 1863, but the hauntings still continue. So it's not necessarily due to people's unrest with being buried below the house. Like, people have been given more proper burials now, but the activity is still just as plentiful. And I don't know how often this house bleeds, but it at least bled a few times.
Yeah, often enough to get that
Yeah.
It had-
distinction.
yes, exactly.
It bled at least once, which is too many times.
Once is enough.
Yeah. And then, because you had mentioned you were going to cover stories of women in the Civil War, we chose a couple stories of women specifically in Gettysburg and their spirits.
Cool.
So the first is Tilly Pierce. Tilly Pierce was born in 1848, and she was the youngest of 4 and lived with her family above her father's butcher shop. She was 15 years old when the battle at Gettysburg began, and a lot of people at the time were ushered out when the battle at Gettysburg began, but Tilly did not. She was heroic and brave and sprung to action immediately and began tending to wounded soldiers. She helped amputate arms and legs. She sutured bleeding wounds and stayed up day and night to assist these dying men. And she's 15. And so during this time, she's journaling about her experiences and documented her surgeries and the tragedies that she witnessed and aided countless men. Despite this battle being the deadliest of the Civil War, she did save a lot of lives. And she actually went on to write a book about her experience titled At Gettysburg, or What a Girl Saw and Heard of the Battle, a True Narrative. I have not read it, but it sounds extremely fascinating and a very unique narrative regarding the Civil War. But there is one quote that I picked for to read. She wrote, and this is in regards to helping the soldiers, some limping, some with their heads and arms in bandages, some crawling, others carried on stretchers or brought in ambulances, suffering, cast down, and dejected. It was truly a pitiable gathering. Before night, the barn was filled with the shattered and dying heroes of this day's struggle. Nothing before, in my experience, had ever paralleled the sight we then and there beheld. There were the groaning and crying, the struggling and dying, crowded side by side, while attendants sought to aid and relieve them as best they could.
So sad.
Tilly lived to the age of 66, and her home now is called the Tilly Pierce Inn, and you can stay there. And it's haunted. Some have said that Tilly herself haunts the home. I'm pretty sure she died in Philadelphia. So I guess death doesn't really matter where you die. She has a strong connection to this home, but a lot of the encounters are with spirits of soldiers. There are poltergeists, spirits sitting on beds, and ghostly children running around the dining room, and a ghostly cat. So there's a lot. You get it all.
I like the cat. That's cool.
Yeah.
I could deal with ghostly cats.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's so interesting. And you can stay there now.
Yeah.
I wonder if, like, I mean, I'm sure Google can easily answer this for me, but how many inns there are? Like, everything is like tavern, inn,
B&B.
bed and breakfast. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's cool. And obviously there's a market for it. Like, people want to go.
Yeah.
And it's cool that there's this preservation of historic buildings and homes and, and having them be converted into an inn now.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I feel like that kind of freezes in time the historic nature of the building instead of having it completely converted.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. It's a paranormal enthusiast delight too, right? Because there's so many haunted places.
Or
and
historians.
we now have access to so many of them because we can stay there, we can eat there, we can walk in the doors. We don't just have to like creep on Google Images and try to not like stalk someone's family home. There's plenty for us to go see.
You can stand in these places.
And I don't know if you guys know, because you've obviously been researching the inns and taverns a little more, but like on the very little that I read about them, aren't there some, I don't think it's every single one, and I don't know how popular it actually is, but isn't there some that you can, obviously it's like an authentic stay, but you can also have like an authentic menu of like, they serve food. From that,
I believe
that
it.
time period.
I would love that.
A foodie paranormal paradise.
This was not at Gettysburg, but we did I want to say like middle school, we did a field trip to an old colonial town, and you like went and did colonial tasks as a kid, like bricklaying and things like that. So I imagine that's
How fun.
They had you doing labor. They're like, these are what children back in the day had to do, manual labor.
and I thought it was very fun. I'm like, ooh, bricks. Oh my God.
That's illegal now.
I know, it's like they don't do that anymore.
That's so funny.
That was a 90s kid thing to do. For sure.
Oh, can you imagine? I guarantee no place does that anymore.
No. Unless you're like consenting to it, like you want to go eat whatever the hell like was served in
medieval times.
It's just like it's a rounded experience, historical experience. It's like, okay, you're going to, stay in this house as it was. You're going to eat what they ate. You're going to see, like it's kind of cool.
I know. I think that's
cool.
I would
so
do it.
cool. I love that. I wish every place had that option where you get to do like the authentic historical stay versus just the modern one.
Yeah, exactly.
And then maybe the ghosts would like divide and only haunt the people that opted for the historical experience.
Okay, but you have to wear the attire that they wore.
Well, I don't know if I really want to
It
wear
would be so uncomfortable, but it would be kind of fun.
So we have to wear corsets.
a whalebone corset.
Yeah. You can't eat the food if you got that on.
I do just want to like walk around like an old house like that with an old white Victorian nightgown and like a little gaslit candle.
Yeah, the gown is good because it's like flowy, minimal layers.
Yes. You're
The corset.
undergarments.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's a restaurant in my hometown that is, because there's some buildings that it's like you have to imagine what it used to look like. It's like it's now shiplap walls and gray cabinetry, but 300 years ago it was really cool. Like this one it's now the Common Man, but it used to be Matthew Thornton's home.
Oh.
One of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence. Wow. And it's still set up like that. So they didn't blow down any walls to make bigger dining. Like all the
That's cool.
like you just dine in different rooms, and he's buried across the street in the cemetery. And it's just like a really cool experience. And I just envision Gettysburg like that on steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So anyway.
The Common Man also, for anyone who's in New England and gluten-free, they have good gluten-free bread if you want a sandwich.
Hot tip.
Get your gluten-free meal in some cool historical, possibly haunted location all in one.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. So when you guys had first covered, Danielle, when you were talking, I think you had mentioned very, very briefly this woman, Mary Virginia Wade, who's known as Jenny Wade, and she's probably the most infamous spirit of Gettysburg. She's the only civilian who was killed during the Battle of Gettysburg, which is also kind of incredible that there was only...
Especially with all these bullet holes going through people's homes.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't she shot while she was making bread or something?
Yes. So it's interesting because there were multiple there was one article that said she was the only civilian killed by gunfire at Gettysburg. And then there was another one that said she was the only civilian killed during Gettysburg generally. So I don't know.
I don't know. It's also probably one of those difficult ones where it's like, because there was so much disease too, I bet there were people like by proxy killed from what was happening at Gettysburg. But there's a link that could have been made and inferred, but there's no actual record of it now. So I don't know. But it's one of those interesting things too, right? Where like this was a time period that was so well documented, and yet we still have so many questions because there's a bunch of discrepancies in what is available to us. But whether Jenny is the only civilian or the only civilian killed by by gunshot, she was killed. Her family actually called her Ginny, or Gin for short for Virginia. But there was a printing error which caused her name to basically be changed and spelled to Jenny. She was one of 6 children, and her father, Captain James Wade Sr., despite being a captain, he was a bit more of pain in the butt, and he spent a lot of his time in jail. And Jenny had to help provide for her family. She had a big family, one of 6, and so she became a seamstress alongside her mother. And in 1862, Jenny's sister Georgiana married her sweetheart, and the two moved into a 2-story red brick house located at 548 Baltimore Street in Gettysburg. And Georgiana's husband, he had enlisted in the Union, and he was sent off to fight. And he was not in Gettysburg when Georgiana gave birth to their firstborn son at the end of June 1863. So Jenny, being a wonderful sister and caretaker in her family, she goes to her sister's house to help with the newborn son. 4 days later, the Battle of Gettysburg began. Jenny stayed by her sister and her nephew's side, aiding them and hunkering down as bullets flew just outside of their home. And then sadly, on July 3rd, a bullet flew through the door of the house. It flew through another wall and then hit Jenny. So it went through 2 layers of house and then hit Jenny directly in the shoulder as she was kneading dough for her family. And the bullet lodged itself into her heart and she died instantly. So sad. Oof. And then almost immediately, Union soldiers ran into the home and they found Jenny dead there in front of her dough that she was kneading in the kitchen. And her mother and her sister, they're obviously shocked, heartbroken. They watched the soldiers wrap Jenny's body into a quilt and bring her down into the cellar. Inside her pocket, they found a photograph of her childhood friend, Johnston, nicknamed Jack Skelly. And the lore behind this says that they were engaged to be wed, but there's also no proof of that. So it very well could just be a love story concocted from this horrible tragedy. 9 days after Jenny's death, Skelly himself died from wounds sustained in the battle. And apparently Jenny's mom, this is kind of, I don't know whether it's beautiful or if it's like kind of gross, but her mom baked the bread that she had been kneading at the time that she succumbed to the bullet wound. And she made 15 loaves and gave them all to the Union soldiers to eat.
I think it's beautiful. But I also
think
think
but I have
it's
questions.
Like sanitary questions.
Yeah. Like, was there blood in it?
Yes,
Well,
that was
yeah.
my...
Well, there's that.
That's mine. That's my only question, actually.
Well, they're not eating the raw dough. At least
That's
it was
true.
baked. Not that baked blood is any better. But I mean, I also feel like it's kind of a time that you can't just waste good dough,
Yeah,
especially
definitely.
enough to make 15 loaves of bread.
True.
Especially if, like, I feel like it's your civil duty to help the efforts, the war efforts and all that. And
Yeah.
if, like, the soldiers need to be fed, like, yeah, it's a little morbid that your dead daughter was just making that. But I don't know. It's a little complicated, but I get it.
It also sounds like the Union soldiers really helped give Jenny a proper burial and like a service to her in her life, so that her mom was like almost like a thank you.
And she was, so they originally brought her down to the cellar after she had passed that day, but then she was later buried on the property and then later moved in November of 1865 and then moved to be beside Skelly, her assumed lover, which if he wasn't, hopefully they were at least just really fond friends who enjoyed being next to each other.
Which they were. So what I find really interesting about this after hearing your portion on death, Danielle, is that the fact that they were able to locate Skelly and bury these two together, and that it was such an active effort to do so in 1865. And there are so many others who are undocumented or, weren't able to be identified. That I think is really, really fascinating.
It adds a little bit more context to how, special that is.
Yeah.
Hopefully special. I mean, like you said, like, Corinne, like, if they didn't have this, like, grand love story, it's just kind of like, okay, like, I guess
Why?
we're good.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if she's carrying around a photo
She
of
was
him.
holding on to it for someone else.
Okay.
Away in the war.
She has no idea who this guy
Like,
is. Someone else was
okay.
just like, can you pass this along? And
Like, can you hold on to this? I don't want to lose it in the war. And she's like, yeah, I'll keep it safe. And then
maybe they fell in love in the afterlife. Maybe that's where the happy ending is.
Matchmaking. Yeah.
Well, so Jenny, she was treated as a hero, and the home, while belonging to her sister, became known as the Jenny Wade House, and it still stands today. It was granted to the government in 1882, and there are many rumors, there are myths, legends, whatever you may call them, regarding the spirits at Jenny Wade House. It's now open for ghost tours, and may sadly have turned into more of a money-making scheme than a space honoring someone who tragically died, but it is accessible for people to enter and experience and hear of the hauntings and what happened within these walls. And that being said, it most definitely is haunted. Some say that it's Jenny Wade who's haunting it, that she's angry and that she has not rested, but I don't really know why her spirit would be super angry. I mean, obviously she lost her life, but she was given much more of like the love and the burial and honored way more than most people got. And it sounds like, Danielle, again, from your segment that you did on our show, it seems like she was given that, like, what was considered almost like a proper death.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like people have just, of the hauntings that are recorded or documented from the Jenny Wade house, people are like, oh, there's an angry spirit here. So I don't really know what's going on necessarily.
Right.
But we do have a story from a listener, and we have a couple stories from listeners from Gettysburg that we'll share right now. We had a listener, Scott, who visited the Jenny Wade house, and this is less angry, but more of like a paranormal anomaly, I guess. So when Scott visited Gettysburg, I'll just read like his words. When we toured Gettysburg, my girlfriend tried to take a picture of the Jenny Wade house, but her battery was drained. She tried 4 times and nothing happened. When we walked further down the street, her camera had full battery return. She tried again the next day, and again, the battery died. But when we visited the Heritage Center, she had a full battery. When we arrived in Hershey a couple days later, she checked her camera, and all of a sudden, she finds a picture of the Jenny Wade house on her camera.
When it was dead?
When it had been dead.
Spooky.
And she didn't take it.
And she tried twice at this place, at the Jenny Wade house. And we've heard, you know, with like paranormal things that they mess with the electricity or the energy. And a lot of people, when you do a paranormal investigation, they always say like, bring extra batteries because spirits are known to drain things. We then had a listener, Molly, who visited Gettysburg in 8th grade on a field trip. She wrote, we went to Gettysburg in 8th grade and did a ghost tour, which is so cool that they did a ghost tour for their field trip.
I know. Why didn't we get to go to that school?
My school
Right?
didn't do that.
No.
Sabrina's like, I was doing manual labor.
I was building
You were
bricks.
a mason.
I didn't even get to take the brick home. Yeah, I just did work for them.
Yeah.
I'm putting this all together now. Like the memory in my mind was so fond. Like, oh, I made bricks, and now you've all made me realize
That you are
I
part
was
of
doing
child labor.
Yeah. Molly said, so we stood in the wooded area, which is on the battlefield, and we were doing ghost thing with a necklace. All of a sudden, I heard gunshots and cannons going off in the background. It was pretty late, so it couldn't have been reenactments. We took pictures on our phones, and the area around us was super dark and hard to see. But on the photos we took, there was an orange glow orb thing in only one photo. We didn't have flash on, and all of the other photos were pitch black, except for this one that had the orb. The place was legit haunted. People had ghost hunting equipment, and a lady told us stories about her inn that I really want to go to. There was a story about a little boy who plays with coins, and up in the attic, there was a place where soldiers would snipe, and that there are blood stains on the floorboards. So obvious residual spirit stuff. This woman was staying at a place where the owners leave at night, and she was staying and heard banging coming from the locked attic. We all got super spooked when she was telling this, and we all saw the building with the bullet holes. A couple months later, we went to the Antietam battlefield and drove through it, and everyone in my mom's car started to inexplicably bawl their eyes out because the energy there was super sad and overwhelming, and my head started to hurt so bad that we had to leave.
I've never had an experience that strong.
No, me neither.
Actually.
One of my friends from grad school, he and his boyfriend were there maybe like 3 years ago, and his boyfriend wasn't a believer in this sort of stuff, but experienced something very similar to that, and they were all walking, and he just could not stop crying. Just suddenly was so overwhelmed with sadness and grief, and just felt the energy that just existed there.
There was one time, this was like very, very early days of our podcast, where I had researched something, and I think it was a story about past lives, but we were about to record, and I got overcome with the most intense emotion, and my mind was like, don't tell this story. Like, don't tell this story. I felt so sad, and so we ended up moving the recording because I was like, I'm going to research something else.
Yeah, we did.
Oh my God.
But like, you have to listen to
Wow.
your gut sometimes, and if like something is telling you, Sabrina, that you should
Yeah.
not be talking about this, then don't. Like, why tempt fate? We
Then
can
don't.
just not
Yeah.
talk about it.
Move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on board with
Like,
that.
listen to your intuition. Like
Exactly.
there's something in there telling you something real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, Corinne, I'm so excited for you to tell this one.
We have one more story from a listener that we're going to end on that we think you guys will.
Okay.
I don't know if you'll appreciate it, enjoy it,
Oh, boy.
hate us for reading it to you. But it's
Good.
Oh no, I feel like I'm gonna be scared.
it scared us. So probably.
It may sway you from going to visit Gettysburg. We'll just say that.
All right.
Oh, is this a possession thing?
No.
No.
Okay, all right. Phew.
But still not great. I'll give you that.
No.
Here's a clue. The subject line is ghosts can cut you. And this was sent in from our listener, Crystal. And it's a story that has been told from the men in her family for years. She writes, years ago, my grandpa went on vacation to visit his brother, my great uncle in Pennsylvania. Being the history buffs that they are, they had always said the next time my grandpa came out to visit that they would make a trip to Gettysburg. Of course, we all know the tales of the haunted battlefields, the countless sightings of ghosts and thousands of lives lost in Gettysburg. So naturally, you can almost guess where this is going. But I promise you, this will still leave you chilled and possibly unlock a new fear. You're welcome. Within minutes of arriving to Gettysburg, my grandpa turned to my uncle and said, "Do you smell that? It smells like gunpowder." My uncle said that he was just about to ask him the same thing. But strangely enough, my aunt and grandmother, who were also in the car, could not smell it. My uncle had arranged for a guided tour for the group. He wanted to surprise my grandpa and really have a fun, history-packed day with a true war buff as the guide. They pulled into the parking lot. Everyone began to unbuckle, gather their things, and unload from the car. My uncle was the first one out of the car, followed by my grandpa, and they both decided to stretch their legs and go for a walk down the paved path to take in the scenery. My uncle began to talk to my grandpa about the countless deaths, the history of the land, and the literal river of blood that ran through the valley with all of the bodies that lay strewn once the battle was over. After a bit of small talk, my uncle notices a man that is walking and begins to walk towards them. And this man is in uniform. Assuming that this is their tour guide, he thought to himself, this is odd. We are early and the tour doesn't start for another half hour, but great. Maybe he's ready for us. He described this man as wearing an authentic Civil War clothing. He was in his young 20s, but looked really disheveled and upset. Confused as to his demeanor, he starts to walk towards the man and introduce himself, until he notices that this man is slightly transparent, floating, and he's holding a knife that is dripping with blood. Immediately, my uncle said he just froze, like sheer panic. What in the hell am I witnessing? This can't be effing real. Kind of stop in your tracks fear that we all hope to never face in our lifetime. In what he describes as a, quote, gliding run, the soldier went from being 20 feet away to immediately in front of my uncle in a matter of seconds. He could feel the man's breath on his face and the sheer look of hatred and fear in this man's eyes. Within what felt like an eternity, but was really just mere seconds, the soldier lifted his arm and in a downward slashing motion ran the knife across my uncle's bare leg. And then the man was gone. My grandpa claims to not have seen the soldier, but he did witness the wound on my uncle's leg. There were no branches or anything nearby that could have caused this wound. My uncle was wearing shorts that day, but he had on long sleeves, leaving his legs the only bare skin exposed. The wound was luckily just superficial, no stitches were needed, but to this day we cannot wrap our minds around how this spirit was capable of harming someone from the other side.
You're right. It's upsetting. But I feel like rare enough that I would still go.
True.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a new fear unlocked for me. Part of the things that I like about ghosts is that they don't touch you normally like that. I mean, not that there aren't a lot of stories of where you can feel like a ghost like touch your shoulder or like brush through your hair or something like that, but something that is so like palpable that you're actually injured in it is that's scary.
Right. They like left a mark.
Well, I guess here's something to make you feel a little bit better is in all the years that we have been doing the podcast, plus I think the rest of our 30 years of lives that we've just experienced the paranormal, Sabrina and I have only ever heard of 2 occasions, this being one, where a spirit inflicted like physical harm like this with a weapon.
Well,
But
oh yeah, sure.
with a weapon. But we know of
Yeah.
more houses that bleed than ghosts that will hurt you with a weapon. So
I guess I would prefer to be in a bleeding house than
yeah.
be the one bleeding.
Yeah, because we've also heard countless stories of like people waking up with like the 3 scratches down their back.
Oh
or-
yeah, the marks or
Classic Mark.
yeah, that's yeah, and it also lends like fear into that entity. That was not a residual or a wrinkle in time sort of thing, or maybe it was a wrinkle in time,
Yeah.
but like that entity recognized that person and like with thought
Yes.
went after him. Like this wasn't just like he was in the path of something that already had been unfolding and was happening
Right.
or whatever. There was real intention behind that, and that what makes it very, aside from there being an actual weapon involved,
Right.
even if there wasn't, even if he like came up and like, you know, was physically doing something with that
Yes.
person, like I see you
Yes.
for what you are type of thing.
That's what's so terrifying is it felt, I mean, the first time Corinne and I read this, it really to me felt like this soldier was in battle, like blipped from true like back in Gettysburg battle days or like the fight that was happening in that place to present day and was still in this mentality of like attack the other side and did.
Yeah, and acted on it.
Yeah.
It's just the fact, too, that he could see the expression, the fear and the hatred in that man's eyes, too. Like, they looked into each other's souls. Oh, it's just so freaky.
It's so freaky. So
Yeah.
freaky.
Well, the consensus is I still would enjoy to go.
Me too.
Yeah.
I would still like I am admittedly afraid of some. Like, I'm not afraid of paranormal in a sense of if they're friendly, but the like difficult part of the paranormal where there's such anguish and horrific deaths and possible hurting, it scares me a little bit. But I think that Gettysburg would be such a cool place to visit, and there's so much history that
Yeah.
I would go, just I wouldn't walk around at night.
Yeah, we can be daytime visitors. We can wander around. We can go get lunch at one of the haunted taverns, you know, do that sort of stuff where we're experiencing it in the daylight. We're seeing things. Like the energy always exists. So we can still feel things, possibly see things. Night has nothing to do with the paranormal. It just heightens our
Yeah.
I guess like awareness because
Fear.
we're nervous.
It's dark.
Yes.
And our senses are off.
Yeah, our senses, I feel like our mind is less cluttered
Yeah.
at night. It kind of slows down and it leaves you more open to actually sensing and picking up on your surroundings, which, like you said, I mean, the energy's there all the time. It's just at night we tend to kind of turn off areas of our brain that are so preoccupied and busy.
Yeah.
And then when we're in that more relaxed state, we're more receptive and we're more aware of what's going on. And I think that's why people report a lot of things at night, because you're paying more attention.
I have a pitch.
I'm ready for
Okay.
it.
Okay. This is based off, Danielle, you said there are places that you can like go and experience the colonial or whatever, you know, back in the day.
I really think, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's just go with the fact that there are. And we don't want to wear the corsets and stuff. So during the day, we will all go explore Gettysburg, do our thing in our normal clothes. And then as night begins to fall, we check into one of these places. They give us our old timey white nightgowns. We walk the halls of this place and eat our meals in our nightgowns and then spend the evening at a old timey preserved home.
I'm ready for that 100%.
That sounds fun, especially because I wouldn't be alone doing it.
Yeah.
That's the key, is not being alone.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, thank you for bringing us on a tour through Gettysburg, unlike we have experienced before.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, like we could obviously go on and on
Yeah.
and on and on about Gettysburg for so many
Yes.
different reasons. But yeah, we were excited to come on your show and give our portion. And now that we have information about Gettysburg on the paranormal side, that just leaves the door open to a lot more opportunities. So next time we come across a park that's like super haunted, we'll reach out.
Please do.
Yeah, let us know. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Of course.
This is so fun.
So fun.
We did the sign off on your show. So do you want to help us do ours?
Yes.
Of course.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was super fun. Until next time, everyone, enjoy the view.
But watch
your back.
Back.
Oh, wait.
I like how
But
you whispered
watch
it.
your back.
I was going to do my demonic growl, but then I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe.
Do it.
You can do it.
You
Go
can
for
do
it.
it.
But watch your back.
Oh, you got that down. Like
Yeah,
alarmingly
that's
well.
really
I also often make really direct eye contact with people when I do it because it's like I'm focusing so much on the voice that I'm just like dead in the eyes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us again this week. If you have a trail tale or story suggestion, send us an email at stories@npadpodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at National Park After Dark and on Twitter at NPAD Podcast. Join our Outsiders Only community on Patreon or Apple subscriptions to listen ad-free, unlock monthly bonus episodes, and exclusive content.
And remember, when you support our sponsors, you are supporting our show. For our exclusive discount codes and source information from today's episode, check out the show notes. For more information on our show, our book recommendations, merch updates, and more, visit our website at npadpodcast.com. And please rate, review, and subscribe from wherever you listen to podcasts.